Today marks the eve of the first anniversary of the attacks on Israel, October the 7th last year.
Remembrance rallies are being held later on today in London, Manchester and Leeds. This comes as a major policing operation took place yesterday in central London as pro-Palestine protests and counter-demonstrations took to the streets.
Well, Vice-Chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, Laurence Julius, joins us now. Laurence, it's good to see you this morning. It's a shocking anniversary, and yet what strikes me about this is that in everything we've seen since October the 7th last year, the one thing which isn't really talked about is October the 7th.
Absolutely. Well, if I would think about the impact of October the 7th, it's had two distinct impacts. One is the trauma caused by the worst pogrom, and the other is the rise of anti-Semitism in Britain, which has really affected your ability to lead a normal Jewish life in Britain today.
Why do you think, Laurence, that we aren't... I mean, there's many examples in the papers today, but rare that we see these... What it was like for the people that went through that. I read some harrowing examples of a lady that was taken hostage and has now thankfully been freed, but her husband is still there. And I can't imagine what she goes through on a daily basis, knowing what it's like in those tunnels for these hostages. Why aren't we talking about it enough? Why do we see protests on our streets and yet no one mentions the hostages?
Well, I think it's down to the media and the media agenda and the mainstream media, BBC, Sky News, Al Jazeera, and the kind of thing they're reporting. They have a narrative. Hezbollah over the last year has fired 10,000 rockets into Israel. But who heard about those Hezbollah rockets before the last week? There have been tens of thousands of rockets fired into Israel the whole time. If you look at the media reporting, Israel's always shown as militaristic with no victims. While Palestinians, it's always humanitarian stories. We were actually in Israel on October the 7th. We felt the sense of helplessness and panic. We felt when there was a rumour of Hezbollah were firing rockets, we felt a sense of helplessness. Yet if you looked at the BBC, even then, the story was on demonstrations in the streets of London against Israel's revenge, which was still to come. And talking about the BBC, it has nurtured this narrative to its network ever since then, one which is unsympathetic, it's not impartial, reporting is without context, and that's a real pity.
Why do you think we see this rise of anti-Semitism in the wake of all of this? I mean, people, and I have to say, people can quite legitimately disagree with what the Israeli government has done in terms of response. You know, that's perfectly allowed. It's perfectly legitimate. But what people do is take it out on and show this anti-Semitism to ordinary people walking around the streets, just trying to live their life. And that, I don't understand how people conflate the two.
I think the media coverage is really responsible. Social media is a cesspit. I reflect on what happened with Southport, where a tweet sponsored by Russia from Pakistan, I think went viral to 1.9 million people within 4 hours. There's stuff on the Middle East which is just as vile and just the same and has the same volume. A lot of younger people get all their news and their flow from social media. There's no real regulation and control. It's actually the narrative which people see, and people who are not really engaged and involved with what's happened in the Middle East, they hear what they read in the media, and the media, unfortunately, as I say, the BBC, Al Jazeera, Sky News, online media has been full of hate and incitement, unfortunately.